Hi and good morning. Welcome to Soft Spot. Finally got that snow I've been asking for. It's not enough for me to go out and use my electric snow blower, my electric snow shovel actually, but it's enough to get on my nerves just a tad bit, because it also changes the traffic pattern in driving. And actually my car is in the shop. It's back in the shop because it's a recurring problem with the transmission that I had fixed. You know, the days of getting a pair of grip pliers, oversized large straight screwdriver, and a ratchet set, and going out and repairing anything on the car, those days are gone. Now everything is electronic. Things have to talk to one another. You know, there's a part in the motor that has to talk to something in the dashboard to tell the transmission what to do. The transmission has to respond back to it. Yes, no, maybe. I can't hear you say it again. It's just amazing. And I have a great mechanic, Chuck, down at Glaze Brothers at Masher and Tabor Road. So if you're looking for a good mechanic, definitely take your car to Glaze Brothers at Masher and Tabor Road. I've been going to him now for well over 16, 17 years. I've taken all my vehicles there, and always send people there as well. But car's back in the shop, trying to find out exactly what's going on with this problem with the communication to the gear ratio. Some kind of difficulty in there with the third and fourth gear ratio goes into another gear on its own, and it's communication. And just like anything else in life, you know, it's always based on effective, positive communication, because some people believe that negative communication is effective as well. Well, it depends on what your desired outcome is. If your desired outcome is for ongoing conflict and controversy, then that probably will be effective in bringing about that result. But if you're seeking to find positive resolve with your conflicts, it certainly is a good idea to take a look at how you're communicating. I often ask the question of people, why is it when we're talking to someone who speaks a different language than ours, do we tend to speak loudly to them? They speak another language. They're not deaf. So why is it we tend to speak louder? Nah, see, you go straight down Broad Street and you make it, and they're standing there looking at you like, why is this dude yelling at me? It's just our communication skills are grounded in many of the things that we talked about in the first segment of the Parent Track. This is segment 2, and we were talking, the last discussion pretty much had ended with understanding and looking at the biological aspects of child development. We looked at how the sperm and the egg got together, and how that whole process began. And if you look in the news today, they have, I forget what state it is that's talking about these new abortion laws, but it's several states that are adhering to these kinds of laws. And one of the things here that I was reading in terms of biological development, it says a week after fertilization, the embryo still has not grown in size, but hatches from its protein shell, because it's in a protein protected shell. So it hatches from its protein shell and adheres to the lining of the mother's uterus. Just kind of put that in your head for a minute. Close your eyes and just envision engaging in sex. Well, you can probably do that one easily, but inside of the body, just envision the sperm cell traveling through the vaginal walls and just making its way up into her inner organs, and spotting that egg and just losing its mind to get to that egg, and not only get to the egg, but find that opening that all those other thousands of sperm cells are trying to find. There's actually, if you go online, there's actually a video. There's a few videos on childbirth. It's just beautiful watching the whole animation. But just imagine in our thinking, in our imagination, that cell. Just imagine you swimming in the pool, just swimming and just going crazy trying to get to the goal, the other end, and you're just, you know, you got 10 other lanes around you and everybody's trying to get at that goal line to finish. Much like Mark Spitz, one of my favorite swimmers, Olympic swimmers, but that's what this sperm cell is doing, and it's fighting to get there, and it's bumping other people out the way and bumping other cells out the way, and some cells are falling off, some are going head to head, and you know, so there's a whole lot going on. And then when it gets there and it finally makes its way in, that's the continuation of the miracle. The miracle happens when that cell, that sperm cell, enters into the egg. And then it goes on with after a week of fertilization. It hasn't grown any, but now it attaches to the uterus, the lining of the mother's uterus. It's just so. And I talked about how all the DNA from both parents are encompassed in that egg, are encompassed in that sperm cell, and our lineage, those things, when we have a predisposition for certain conditions, those things are all passed on just through those two tiny microscopic cells. So we talked about the genetic piece, and we talked about all those things you passed on, how all your characteristics are passed on into that cell, and how you begin to look at the child now, and the child looks like one parent, the child has resemblances of both parents, or the child has some resemblances of other family members, and you find it like just so astonishing that that happened. When we look at some of the aspects in terms of development, and we look at, for instance, the age, the stages, the child development stages in regards to the age. You have the neonate, which is from 0 to 30 days. You have the infant, which is 0 to 12 months. You have the toddler, 1 to 3 years. Play age is 4 to 5 years. Now these are things, there are things that are happening during these, should be happening during these stages. Things that you should be looking to happen. And remember, I said there are some things that will happen with or without you. We facilitate the changes to be, those developments to be a lot quicker. A child walks when they feel like walking. How many times have we spent countless hours carrying a child around by their hands and telling, come on, walk to me, walk to daddy, walk to mommy, and they don't do it. And then one day you're sitting at the kitchen table, left the child in the middle of the floor on the blanket, and here they come sashaying into the kitchen, and you don't have the camera handy. Usually that's the case. It's that moment it happens, and you just don't have your camera. It's a Kodak moment. But that's how it happens. It doesn't happen because you make it happen, because I make it happen. That's not how it happens. It happens because it's a natural order of development. A child should be sitting up. A child should be able to identify voices, facial features, look at faces and smile and react to the face. A sense. All those things are going to happen without you. Without you. Primary school age, middle childhood, also called prepubescence, 4 to 12 years old. Elementary school age, 6 to 12 years old. Pre-adolescence, pre-teen age, 10 to 12. Adolescence and puberty, check this out. Adolescence and puberty, 13 to 19 years old. 13 to 19 years old. But we tend to predicate manhood and womanhood, adulthood, on the age of 18. And here we're looking at, and this is on Wikipedia under child development, so there's a lot of different theory, a lot of different theorists on this, but based on this and looking at it, puberty, 13 to 19 years old. Now, if a person is in puberty during these years and engaged in sex during these years, pubescence and sexual activity are very critical periods, no pun intended, and we miss all of that. And if a child has not been educated on what happens during these periods of pre-adolescence, prepubescence as it's referred to, and adolescence, puberty, that whole estrogenial and hormonal process, all those, the testosterone, if children are not explained what's happening with their bodies, what's happening with their minds, because there's some psychological impact that we miss. We say that they're smelling themselves. No, they're developing and they're coming into themselves. And when we understand that the child is coming into themselves, what does that feel like? What does that look like? We make it so negative when they're coming into themselves that we make them not want to be themselves, which is why we have so many of our children who stay to themselves, isolate, wind up being bullied, wind up being in a situation where one day they just explode because of our own inability as parents. Our own inability as parents to appropriately address what our child is going through. Because we don't even know. And what we do know in our own minds is dangerous, because we term it inappropriately, we term it negatively, but it's part of life. It's part of life. And we make it so trivial. And that's an experience that a human being must have in order to come into self and to begin to have a positive self-image, a positive self-concept, because the development of the self-concept is so important. Because I also talked about in the previous session about coming from a stage of dependency into independency. And I talked about how dependency, when both parents live together, looks one way. When parents separate and have poor communication between one another, dependency looks another way. When parents separate and they continue to have positive engagement of one another to include the child, then dependency looks even more different. So the child, we don't know how the child is internalizing all that's going on, because we very rarely even ask the question. And when we do ask the question, it's usually like a flyby question, and we get a flyby response, because if you really cared, we'd be sitting down face to face having this discussion, as opposed to you asking, well, how you doing with your father not being here now? How you doing with your mother not being here? You know, that's things adults do. Then we're conditioning their thinking to believe that's what adults do. No, all adults don't just part ways. That's not what all of us do. No, we made childish decisions. We made immature decisions. At 13, 17, 18, 19 years old, I'm engaged in sex, unprotected sex. I'm out there making a child. I'm out there having a child. I'm still in puberty. I still don't understand what's happening with me with puberty. Now I've added sex to the equation. Now I am totally off the charts with emotions. And we're not speaking to any of that. We're not speaking to any of that with our children. Especially when our children at those critical ages of puberty between 13 and 19 become parents. Especially when they become parents. The child's not even born yet. They become parents as soon as you find out I'm pregnant. I believe you have to begin to now be groomed and come into parenthood. And that's a stage that's totally missed. Because what happens is we start giving these new young parents, and not just young, but we're speaking specifically to young, but we tend to give this misinformation to a lot of parents, new parents, even old parents who are having new children. We start saying things to them about how they need to take better care of the child, how they need to do this, how they need to do that, you know, as opposed to allowing them to come into parenthood and to set the example first of all. And part of setting the example is exposing your own shortcomings as a parent and giving a child a full understanding of what being a parent really means. It means taking care of yourself first, so you can take care of your family second. Because if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't get your house in order, if you don't get your psyche in order, it's not going to make any difference, because you won't be able to do anything for that child. Because you'll be feeding the child the same insanity that you have lived in for the period of years that you have until you came into parenthood. And if you're a young parent and you fall into that age bracket of 13 to 19 years old when you were still in puberty, then what information are you really given? What kind of information were you given? So this is real important that we start looking at, and go online and look this stuff up, childhood development. Because part of our development as parents is to research information that will help us better equip our children. Better equip our children to face life on life's terms. That's what parenting really is. Parenting is a matter of setting the example. Parenting is a matter of boundary setting. It's a matter of modeling certain behaviors that are necessary for the child to begin to see. I'm not talking about being perfect. I'm not talking about being error-free. We're human beings. That's not even on the table for discussion, because all of us are flawed. All of us. But it's a matter of we have to set a certain tone. I won't accept certain behaviors from my children. I don't care how long I've been out of your life. I don't care how old you get. I don't care what you think about my opinion. I will not accept certain behaviors, and I stand on that. Whatever you have to say, you will say it appropriately. I want you to speak, but you will say it appropriately. It's just a matter of setting boundaries. It's a matter of you have to deal with situations in your life when faced with certain things in an appropriate manner. It's about appropriateness. If you know that you did some things as a child yourself, why would you be sitting there in front of your child and act like you're unscathed of these things? None of us escape the social ills that we're all subjected to every day. I don't care what it is. Self-righteousness is a social ill. Being judgmental is a social ill. Arrogance and self-righteousness far exceed any of the social ills that we're faced with every day. And they're so subtle for many people that people do it and don't even, it's like an unconscious action. It's like an unconscious action. Because it's become so embedded in you to be that way that you think your way is the right way, the only way, the ultimate way. Therefore, anything anybody else says really has no relevance to you, and you talk past it, you talk over it, always trying to hammer home what your point is and standing on your point and never hearing the other person. And you don't learn anything. Which is a big problem in communication with our children, because we keep saying, what's wrong with these children? Why are these kids so disrespectful today? The question is, why are we so disrespectful today? Why do we disrespect ourselves? Why do we disrespect our partners? Why do we disrespect their other parent? Why do we disrespect them? Why do we disrespect our neighbor? Why do we disrespect anything and think that this is not going to be passed on to our child, and when they're faced with similar situations in their lives, they deal with it the same exact way? And you're sitting there saying, what's wrong with you? Well, why would you do that? And then if they say to you, well, I learned it from you, that's what you do, then what do you say? Oh, well, you do as I say, not as I do. I'm the adult here. What makes you an adult? Age? Age? Young adulthood, according to this, is 20 to 39. Young adulthood. What does young adulthood look like to you in your mind? 20 to 39 years old is young adulthood. That just means that during those stages that there are certain things that you should be doing. But we go, and then there's middle adulthood, which is 40 to 59 years old. And then there's the advanced adulthood, senior citizen, 60 plus years. And then death is the ultimate. It's inevitable for all of us. But the reality of it is, when you look at very critical adolescence and puberty being between the ages of 13 to 19 years old, and young adulthood being between 20 and 39, what is that saying? It's saying that if I haven't shed some of these things that happen during the prepubescent, pre-adolescent stage, and during the course of adolescence and puberty, I haven't been developed appropriately. I haven't had the right things discussed with me. I haven't had the right discussions to aid in my development. That means that when I move into young adulthood, I'm probably still in puberty. Now, young adulthood goes up to 39 years old. So I could still be shedding puberty at 28, 29, 35, 39 years old. I can still be just shedding off puberty. Which is why if you look at our society, matter of fact, look at your own life, because it's so easy to look at others. Look at your own life and ask yourself, what were you doing during those stages? Were you out partying? When did you stop partying? Was it at the point of having a child that you stopped partying? Did you go back to partying once you had your child, once your child get to a certain age? Why did you go back? Why did you go back? What was going on in your life? How did you handle relationships? Were you just being single, free to mingle? Or were you looking towards marriage and practicing the necessary conduct in order to prepare for marriage? Because that's a whole nother aspect of your development, of our development as adults. Now, middle adulthood, 40 to 59 years old, well, what should be going on in our lives at that time? What should be going on in our lives at that time? So when we look at all these things about ourselves, because again, that was, this is actually going into the psychological aspect of development, because when we talk about self-perception, how I see myself and how I develop, one of the significant, the hallmarks of the developmental psychology is being able to make appropriate decisions in life, being able to problem solve, being able to approach emotional situations in an age-appropriate manner, such as, where are we at here? This field examines change across a broad range of topics, including motor skills and other psychological processes, cognitive development involving areas such as problem solving, moral understanding, which is right or wrong, and conceptual understanding, language acquisition, social, personality, and emotional development, and self-concept, and identity formation. Major contexts to consider when analyzing child psychology are social context, cultural context, and socio-economic context. These are critical. These are very critical. And if you look at our children today, you will see that they're culturally deficient. The social context, the way they look at life, is almost to a point of carelessness, because they're seeing few, if any, examples of hope, of what they perceive as success, of any changes in the world. They begin to see the world as a violent place, which is why they delve so deeply into being attached to electronic devices. And I'm not talking, bashing them, because I'm attached to my electronic devices, and I'm doing some things to kind of cut down on some of the usage and the connection with those things. But I mean, headsets. I was on a train the other day on SEPTA. Everybody has an iPod. Everybody has some kind of Walkman. Nobody's talking to anybody. Everybody's like in a total zone. Everybody. Not just our children. Adults too. But mostly all of the children that I saw were either texting, or they had a plug into the phone listening to music. Very little conversation. Now when they're traveling in groups, they still will have one plug in the ear, and maybe have them both in and have it turned down low, or have it hanging around their neck, and still the constant, the ongoing stimuli. Ongoing. It's like, the multitasking, and I have to do at least 3 to 4 things at one time. At least. At least. Think about it. Right now I'm sitting here and I'm videotaping Blog Talk Radio Show. I'm sitting here online recording the Blog Talk Radio Show on the radio. And if there are listeners are listening in. I'm also sitting here with an iPad, and I'm online with this presenting this information, and in the form of a commentary, right from my iPad. I have a pen in hand. I'm also looking down here. I have another paper here from education.com on the development of self-concept. I'm also drinking the remainder of my warm cup of coffee. I have the XM radio on in the background with the spa music. I have the fish tank, which has the filter that's running, and you can hear the running water. I have the pond, and I can. So I'm so stimulated, and that's as a result of my birth, the DNA, and the collaboration of my mother and father, and all those things, and life's conditions. How I've internalized traumatic events, and so on and so forth. Listen, when we come back next week, we're going to further this discussion on psychological development and self-concept. Once again, thank you for joining me at SciSpot. I can't say it enough. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you listening. I hope that these shows are helping rebuild some of the familiar relations in this world. Thank you. Peace.